Iraq and, frankly, bedevils the confrontation with Iran, which is that ugliest of three-letter words, O-I-L, oil.
Okay, let's go to Darius. He's called in from Hamburg in Germany. He wants to talk to you, George. Darius, you're on the air.
Hello. I'm from Germany, yes, and I just want to say it's an honor to talk to you, George, because you're one of the very few politicians who speak the truth, unlike virtually anyone in the European Union who tells us what the facts are. And we appreciate what you're doing, really, unlike some other callers, who obviously don't know anything about the topic. And they, what's really striking for me is that they're referring to Hezbollah as a terrorist organization, when actually only 6 countries officially classify Hezbollah as a terrorist organization, and 2 of them are United States and Israel, and Canada, and the Netherlands, and also England and Australia. And that's only 6 countries.
It's very largely, but I'll tell you this, Dareth, and thanks for what you said. I'll tell you this, I'm sitting here in Beirut, and let me tell you that the British ambassador here has regularly met with Hezbollah over the last few years. They have regular political consultations. The American and French governments have been regularly consulting Hezbollah. I was in the parliament today speaking to the leader of the Hezbollah parliamentary bloc. Don't forget, Hezbollah are an important political force here, an elected political force. And they are dealing regularly with the American and French governments. And so it's really a complete red herring to try to twist this debate into one of supporting or not supporting terrorism. We just have to get used to it. Hezbollah are the Lebanese national resistance. The Lebanese see them that way, just in the way that Mr. Netanyahu saw the terrorist gangs, as were described earlier, of the Stern gang and the Ergun gang. They were seen by Mr. Netanyahu as freedom fighters, and they were seen by the British soldiers that they were killing as terrorists. Now, we have to face the truth. It's an eternal one, that one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. I sat in the House of Commons when Mrs. Thatcher described Nelson Mandela, then in the dungeons of apartheid South Africa, as a terrorist leader. Now, everyone in the world thinks he's a saint.
Okay, thank you, Darius. Let's carry on, George. One thing just occurred to me, actually, George. Does the British ambassador, do the British people who are living out in Beirut and have lived out through all the troubles and who are responsible for Britain's actions in Beirut, if you like, were they surprised by the ferocity of the Israeli attack?
I think so. I think everyone felt that the capture of the 2 Israeli soldiers would be dealt with the way that hundreds of other such incidents have been dealt with, namely by prisoner exchange. Now, Olmert is a weak and inexperienced leader. Stronger leaders than him, Sharon, Mr. Shamir before him, one of the leaders of one of those Zionist groups, and Mr. Begin even before him, they regularly exchanged huge numbers of prisoners in exchange for small numbers of Israeli prisoners. Sometimes even Israeli corpses were exchanged for hundreds of Lebanese and Palestinian prisoners. And that's how these leaders handled such an event. On this occasion, although we now realize it was premeditated because of Seymour Hersh, the great American journalist who wrote in the New Yorker last week, or the week before, that actually this attack by Israel was pre-planned with George Bush, who shared the information with Tony Blair. According to Seymour Hersh, this was all almost a year ago discussed in Washington of what they would do to attack Hezbollah when the opportunity arose. So I think people were taken by surprise by the ferocity of it, and they certainly didn't expect it would last longer than any other Israeli-Arab war. That's a remarkable thing. All these famous wars that we know about, the 67 war, the 73 war, the 82 war, all lasted less time than this one did. And it was deliberately prolonged by the opposition of Bush and Blair to an immediate ceasefire.
Just people who are tuning in may not realise that you're in Beirut at the moment. Tomorrow night on the show, you're going to be down in the south of Lebanon. Just as a matter of interest, I mean, you're walking around the streets today. You said you can't go very far. There's a lot of unexploded bombs around the place. There are corpses. You can smell it. I mean, is there any sound of laughter? Is there the sort of sound that you would normally get in a capital city there, or is it eerily quiet?
Yeah, it's pretty quiet. People are fairly somber. But the irony is, and perhaps it's not an irony, as speaking as an East End MP, an MP in the London East End, the spirit of the people in the rubble, the people who were wandering around today looking for their family pictures that I talked about, the people who are literally gazing at a pile of ash and bricks that used to be their home, were absolutely stoic. There was no trace of distress or shock, still less any attempt to blame Hezbollah for what had happened to their houses. And if you think about it, that was the spirit of the Blitz, as demonstrated by our own people in many parts of the country, but perhaps particularly in the East End of London. Nobody who was being bombed by Hitler in the Blitz was blaming Churchill. They were blaming Hitler.
Yeah.
And it made their determination to fight Hitler all the greater. And the people of the East End of London bravely and stoically went about their business even while their houses and streets were burning.
Okay, let's go back to the calls. Thanks for that, George. Ali is in London. Ali, you're on the air through to George Galloway, live in Beirut.
Assalamu alaikum, George, and yo, James, well, what's happening? Very quickly, I just got 2 points to make. I think you've just answered it a couple of minutes ago about the oil, the dirty word oil. Mm-hmm. Basically, my theory is that there is a pipeline being, or going to be built strategically through Afghanistan, through to Iran, through to Iraq, etc., through to southern Lebanon. And basically, that's obviously controlled by the United States. That's one of the reasons why they didn't prevent the war. Obviously, they've got their own people in there, like in Afghanistan, and going to hopefully put it in Iraq. Second point is in response to Nicole. Basically, she wants to know why there's no peace, with Palestine, with all them Qassam rockets going over. Basically, Palestine lives like gypsies in their own country. Israel controls the water supply. They control pretty much all the economics. Palestine can't develop themselves, and neither can the West Bank. I mean, the West Bank was developed by Israel. It was a nice place, and when they did pull out, they went back in there and destroyed it with missiles. So they're back to square one, living like gypsies again. I mean, what exactly do these people have to do to actually bring themselves out of poverty? What exactly do they need to do?
I think that's absolutely right, Ali. And the reality is that Nicole is not doing her fellow Israelis any good by continuing this myopic blindness towards the essential facts of the matter. And all that's going to result, if the policies that were reflected by her are to continue, is more and more suffering. Now, she mentions that some of the sons and brothers of Israelis like her get killed. That's true. And in fact, Israel is the most dangerous place in the whole world to be a Jew. But of course, the Palestinians suffer 10, 20 times greater casualties. And from amongst the families of those casualties come the next generation of suicide bombers and people who are going to kill Nicole's sons and brothers. Now, I think it'd be better if we broke out of this vicious cycle, if we said enough is enough suffering, enough blood, enough death. Let's get around a table and agree a comprehensive settlement. And I believe that this moment is a good moment to be advancing that, because Israel now knows that it cannot count on its military superiority. It was whipped by a group of guerrillas, of irregulars, firing Katyusha rockets, which were first fired in 1942 from what were known as Stalin organs. And if they could not defeat Hezbollah in 33 days, they only stopped because it was clear they were not going to defeat them, then their moments of military superiority have passed. And now is a good time to sit down and make that settlement. And it would be good for Nicole too.
Okay, thanks, Ali. Thanks, George. We'll take a short break. We'll come back. Final 15 minutes of the